Curiosity, oh yeah, it's hot outside now. It's midday. Let's see how it is. Oh my
Thank you, everybody. Welcome to this meeting of full council for Bletchley and Fenny Stratford Town Council, being held here at Newton Lees Pavilion on the 21st of November 2023. My name is Nathaniel Kelly Wilson, and I'm chairing this meeting, and I'm the chair of the council. Before we start, there are some housekeeping points to note. We are not expecting a fire drill. So if the fire alarm sounds, please leave as quickly as possible. The fire exits are located at either end of the room, and the fire assembly point is at the far side of the car park. If you do need to use the toilets, there are toilets in the hall and in the corridor directly behind us. Please could all people turn off their mobile phones and put them to silence. We want everybody to be able to hear, so please respect whoever is speaking by not chatting amongst yourselves. Also, you should be aware that the meeting is being recorded and will be streamed on our social media channels. So if the camera can see you, then you will be broadcasted on YouTube as part of this meeting. We're especially pleased to welcome so many members of the public here today. And I just would like to remind you that you are here to observe the meeting or to make representations during the public speaking session only. Are there any members of the public that wish to make any representations during the public speaking session before I carry on?
Chair, if it's helpful, we have a collated list of questions that have come in from residents in advance. Nobody's registered to speak, but obviously it's up to you if you wish to. Okay,
so we will go through the meeting. I will note that at this point, nobody has made any representations to speak, and we will consider the presentation, and if there is time, may consider if anybody has any questions. Okay. This is a formal meeting and it has to be conducted according to our standing orders. This means that any representations made during the public session are for a maximum of 3 minutes, and people may only speak once. I would also ask councillors to try and limit the amount of times that they need to speak tonight, and for a maximum of 3 minutes. And I'll be asking the Vice Chair to manage the time for each speaker. This is to allow us to complete all of our business within the required timescale. If anybody would like to speak to the council at length, please do feel free to speak to us after the meeting or contact us via our website, social media, or through our office team at Sycamore House. I'd like to welcome our guests from Milton Keynes Council and Milton Keynes Development Partnership today, who are here to talk to us about the draft brief for the Brunel Centre site. We have nothing in this session. No. Okay, right. So we'll go on to the agenda. Unfortunately, there are some things that we have to do first, and that is to consider apologies for absence and some other things. But we'll move on to the main subjects in a second. Okay, so. Item 1 on the agenda, to note any councillors' apologies for absence.
We've got apologies for absence from Councillor Ely. Those are the only apologies.
Thank you. Item 2 on the agenda, to note councillors' declarations of factors on the agenda. Does anybody wish to make a declaration? Okay, I will take the silence that we are okay to go forward. Next item on the agenda, public speaking. Nobody's pledges. Oh, sorry. Okay, the draft minutes of the previous meeting. Unless anybody tells me that they have got any comments on the minutes, then I will take them as everyone's okay with them and they're okay for the chair to sign the minutes when they're available. Everybody happy with that? Thank you. Next item on the agenda, public speaking, but nobody's registered to speak, so we will skip that item. Item number 5. So we are with you now. Do you want to present?
Yeah.
David and Adam, I think. I think John's going to do the honours.
Just tell me when you have to.
Yeah, okay. So my name's David Bland and I'm a senior urban designer at the council. I'll provide an overview of the contents of the development brief, and then Adam here will talk more generally about MKDP's plans for the site. Next slide. So the brief covers the Brunel Centre, the former Sainsbury's and Wilko stores, and also includes Stanier Square. The site is principally in the ownership of MKDP, but part of it's also owned by Milton Keynes City Council. So the purpose of the brief is to provide planning guidance and design principles for development of the site. It'll be approved by the council, but it won't be adopted as a supplementary planning document. So there'll be a material consideration in determining planning applications, but have limited weight as opposed to if it was a supplementary planning document. So it doesn't go through the full sort of process that a supplementary planning document would go through. And the brief will be used by Milton Keynes Development Partnership to market the site to potential development partners. Next slide. So the brief includes a section on the policy context for the brief. So Plan MK is the development plan for the site. Once the neighbourhood plan, which is currently at an early stage, is adopted, then that also will be part of the development plan, will be used to determine any applications, but at the moment it's Plan MK. The Plan MK includes policies relevant to the site, some of which are general policies, others are site specific. So policy ST16 provides a strategic policy for the wider central Bletchley area. And the policy includes development principles for that area relating to improved public realm, refurbishment and redevelopment of key sites and buildings, improved pedestrian connections and legibility, and provision of higher density residential development. Policy ER9 of Plan MK designates Bletchley as a town centre in the retail hierarchy, which means it's an appropriate location for retail development and other main town centre uses, which could include offices, arts, leisure uses, those sort of things. And then policy ER18 is a specific policy that identifies key shopping frontages within the Brunel Centre and on the edge of the Sainsbury's store. And any redevelopment will need to re-provide shopping frontages within the development, but not necessarily in the same configuration, and necessarily in the same location. Next slide. The other part of the sort of policy context for the site is the Central Bletchley Urban Design Framework supplementary planning document, which was adopted by the council in March 2022. Brunel Centre lies within the town centre west opportunity area within that supplementary planning document. And that opportunity area also includes Chandos Place, the bus station, and the Albert Street car parks. And any development of this site should take account of proposals within the SPD for the adjoining opportunity areas which cover Saxon Street and Queensway. So, the urban design framework establishes key development principles, and the development brief itself takes forward those principles into the document. In particular, the development principles that propose the redevelopment of the Brunel Centre site and also reconnection of Queensway to Buckingham Road. Next slide. The brief also includes a contextual analysis of the site and the surrounding area, which describes the current uses on the site and also identifies surrounding land uses. It also considers the existing movement network in the wider area and the quality and extent of pedestrian routes on the site. From the contextual analysis and the review of the policy context, a number of opportunities and constraints have been identified for the site. One of these is to reconnect Queensway and Buckingham Road for pedestrian and cycle movement. Further opportunities to mark that gateway created through reconnecting Queensway and Buckingham Road. And also to create positive frontages to the public realm. So on the blank sort of frontages that exist on the edge of the site, the opportunity is to create something even more positive with activity along those frontages. And also to improve pedestrian permeability, so making it easier for pedestrians to move through the site, creating activity. There are some constraints identified. Existing two-storey housing around the edge of the site will need to be taken into consideration when developing the site. The level differences at the end of between the Brunel Centre and Brunel Roundabout, and there's also there'll be a need to accommodate servicing in any development. Slide. So the brief sets out a number of development principles, proposes mixed-use development with housing above predominantly retail frontage on the ground floor, but there's scope to incorporate other complementary town centre uses, including evening economy, community, leisure and cultural uses. Specific reference in the brief to a community hub, possibly health facilities as potentially appropriate uses within the development. Another principle of the brief is that the fronts of buildings should face the street rather than what we have at the moment with blank frontages facing the streets and internal pedestrian routes within the Brunel Centre. And also new streets will be provided within the southern part of the site to increase pedestrian connectivity and also provide access to the servicing of the development. Next slide. As I said before, the key principle which comes from the urban design framework is the reconnection of Buckingham Road and Queensway. The marking of the gateway to the town centre with key buildings, fronting of Duncombe Street and Oliver Street with new built development and active frontages to those streets. And the scale and massing of development should respect the immediacy of housing adjoining the site along Duncombe Street, Oliver Road and Osborne Street. Next slide. So the next steps in the process, the consultation runs until this Thursday. Any comments on the brief can be sent to the urban design team either by email or in writing, and we're looking to approve the final brief in the new year.
Thank you. Is that the end of the presentation?
It is of that, and just to add a little bit around the development. So I suppose for those who don't know, Milton Keynes Development Partnership, we're an independent property company, but we're owned only by the council. So an opportunity came up to purchase the Brunel recently. We've kind of stepped in to advise the council in the town deal programme and some of the regeneration they're doing in the area. What you saw is all very technical and procedural, and I suppose it is exactly that really. As a public body and as public land, we go through this procedure to sort of establish what principles of development are. What everybody usually wants to see is the detail, and I suppose just to give you some of the milestones, there will be no scheme or any proposals for quite some time now. So having established these principles, hopefully, and having the document approved in the new year, we'll then go on a process to procure a development partner who will ultimately come along and design the scheme that they will submit for planning. In terms of timings for that, I expect the search for the partner to take most of 2024, and we'll be heading into 2025 before anybody sees a design as such. We're working towards starting on site in 2026. So our tenants in the Brunel shopping centre at the moment are aware of that kind of vacation point. And the only activity we'll sort of see between now and then, presuming the shopping centre continues to tick along as it is at the moment, is demolition of the Sainsbury's unit, which is scheduled to take place early in the new year as well, because that has become a real attractive nuisance recently of sort of break-ins and antisocial behaviour. So we'll be clearing the site, and then, as I say, hopefully manage Wilkinson's and the Brunel until 2026.
Okay, thank you. So we've got some questions from which have been given in by some residents. I will kind of read them out. I just want to kind of make the point that these are from residents and they may not necessarily be the opinion of the council. So, okay, so the first item is around heritage and identity. There is currently no mention or acknowledgement of the role of Bletchley Town Centre and what the site can play in supporting tourism for Bletchley Park. There's currently no explicit reference to this being stipulated in the design brief, e.g. through creation of a tourism centre, public art linked to the town's heritage, or namings of the new buildings linking to the heritage of the town. How will you proactively ensure that the design brief requires any development that respects the globally significant history of Bletchley Town Centre with reference to the code breakers of Bletchley Park during the Second World War?
Yes, there's a few elements there, most of which I would say are being looked at. So it's sort of taking public art heritage and what I call sort of the brand of Bletchley. So this is the property development project that sits under the wider town deal programme, and my colleague Darryl, looking around, is not here this evening, but usually chips in to help in terms of what the council are looking at with that work. So they're looking at appointing an advisor that starts to pull together that narrative for Bletchley and look at a bit of marketing campaign and make sure both councils and the public know what that programme of other projects are. So one of them is sort of marketing vacant sites. Another one is around a tourism strategy, making sure that happens. There is a public art commission, a assuring commission. So I'm sure some of you would have been consulting that and involved in that. And the public realm outside the front of this development is a really obvious place to consider for that. So we are having those conversations with the sort of arts and culture team. And then in terms of tourism, I'm not aware of any need for kind of a tourism centre, but in terms of supporting tourism generally, we also own the police and fire station site, which is just up the bridge towards the train station, and that is due to be marketed in the new year. And one of the uses we will be marketing that for is hotel provision, and looking at whether there's a need for that closer to Bletchley Park than what we have at the moment. So it's sort of being looked at in the round. I would say it's early on to be considering what quite sort of detailed considerations for the scheme, but we're certainly seeing it as an opportunity to market this as something different to the usual kind of vanilla apartment blocks or houses that we get across Milton Keynes, given the history of Bletchley. So an interesting opportunity, but stay tuned.
Thank you. Next item, and this is something that the council has also discussed in the past, and so I may add a bit, but the question was, how can residents and the council influence the use of Section 106 monies as part of this development to contribute to additional local services which will be required as Bletchley welcomes more residents and visitors, e.g. family centres, public health and charity services, tourists, information, access to high street banking and cash point provision. Just to add to that, I think that our council has seen a lot of new development coming into our parish, which is, you know, very close to completion. And on lots of those projects, we have actually seen money go towards extension of library services, not in our parish. We've seen money go towards a university in central Milton Keynes. How do we actually ensure that the benefit of, if local residents here in Bletchley and Fenny Stratford are going to see this development, that actually we can invest in our town centre through section 106, and it's not being paid for, it's not paying for something that does not directly impact Bletchley and Fenny Stratford.
Yeah, I'll link that because I've got your questions here. I think that sort of links into 4 as well, around section 106 monies for green infrastructure and maintenance in the future. And I suppose to both of those, there's 2 elements. There's one, making sure you get the section 106 monies in the first place. So lots of the development you would have seen so far in Bletchley has been in third party land, third party ownership. And I suppose the difference here and the distinction is the council's powers to negotiate and get that money through planning is fairly limited, actually, but it's pretty weak. Where you own the land, and the council does for MKDP, you can be in a much stronger position to make sure you get the section 106 money and negotiate what that is. So we're on a good start in terms of getting that, and we have a good track record of doing that around Milton Keynes. We're sort of new to Bletchley, but we're making sure we're always getting affordable housing, section 106 on our sites. Because frankly, the land isn't transferred to the developer till they do. And there's lots of money floating around in their development, but they're just very good at hiding it. We're very good at finding it. So let's make sure we get it first. In terms of what it's spent on, then there'll be a whole sort of process through the planning route to sort of work out what that's allocated towards. What we're hoping, given the scale of this site, is that actually some of those provisions can be provided on site, so that contribution won't be necessary, but should a civic or social sort of asset be needed, there's an opportunity to do that on the site. So we're really interested on the ground floor, for example. I think we'll come back to sort of land uses, but rather than just more retail, looking at actually what are the kind of civic and social services we might be able to provide in a hub on the ground floor like that. And so rather than giving money towards health contributions that sort of disappears into the ether, that potentially there's some physical provision on the site.
In terms of lots of developments, just to add, go back onto that question, in terms of lots of developments, what we've seen is the kinds of front loading of development and the backloading of infrastructure. So to talk about your point about civic and social uses, could there be any commitment that facilities such as health or public facilities would actually be in the first phases of the development rather than having to wait for the development to be complete?
Yeah, certainly an opportunity to look at that. We're having conversations with the sort of team behind Bletchley Pathfinder and the sort of health work that's going on in Bletchley. So we're really interested in this being, having some sort of reason to want to live here or come here that is slightly different to the usual product. And I would come back to, whilst we're working with a development partner, we're very good at making sure they do it. So often in sort of other schemes you will have seen, they come back later and say they can't afford to do it anymore. They can't afford to give the contribution. And so that doesn't happen on where we own the land. So yeah.
Next question, thank you for that. The next question was around nighttime economy, which I believe in your piece talk about potential uses such as casinos or nightclubs, and local residents maybe feel that they are already well served with regards to those, and this would not be required. Have you got any comment on whether that is going to be a use that would be used?
Yeah, to be honest, when I read this question earlier, that surprised me as well. So, David, in terms of land uses, I'm not sure what we've got in there. They're usually pretty wide and pretty flexible in terms of every land use. And as I say, you're unlikely to have residential all the way down to the ground floor. There's likely to be non-residential. I'd be very surprised if we ended up with a nightclub or a casino, to be honest.
Okay. So, I mean, I know that the nighttime economy also includes stuff like late opening restaurants, that sort of thing. I know that the council have discussed this before, and we would actually like to see quality restaurants that would bring people into the town. But so there's some nighttime uses that would be attractive, and perhaps some that aren't so attractive. So.
Yeah, if I could just say, I think the reference to the nightclubs is where they're within the policy section where it defines what the national planning policy framework defines as maintained centre uses. It includes that. So although maintained centre uses are the sort of things that would be acceptable within the town centre, it doesn't mean you have to have all of them. And it wasn't, the brief isn't promoting those uses, but maybe we could make some changes to the brief to make it a bit clearer that that's not what we're proposing.
We'd be quite happy to receive a response to say no nightclub or casino, please.
Thank you. Next one was about green infrastructure and maintenance. How will the design brief enhance the green infrastructure of Bletchley? Will this be maintained by Milton Keynes City Council, new private landlords, or by the Bletchley and Fenny Stratford Town Council in the future? If so, can we please ensure that sufficient Section 106 monies are made available to support the ongoing maintenance of any landscaped areas?
The short answer is I don't have the details of that right now. So is green space important? Absolutely. Does it need to be looked at in the round of what's happening in Stania Square, the public realm projects? The residential at the front of this site is likely to be flatted. It's likely to be higher density, but there's sort of housing behind us. So how do you link through to those different areas in a nice way? The design of which, as I say, I don't have the detail yet. All I can say is important to us. In terms of long-term maintenance and Section 106 contributions, to be confirmed, there's lots of sort of registered providers, housing associations that we work with that would take it on themselves. It could rest with the parish council. The council could take it on, all to be determined to look at what the cost of that is. But we're advocates of low maintenance where as much as possible.
Thank you. I know, just to add to that question, I'm the town councillor for Newton Lees, where this building is, and on this site we have had about half of development is under private management and half is going to be adopted by the council. And as this is a building, as this is an area that you've talked about, how Milton Keynes City Council and its development company can actually have some best practices. I think many people would be very concerned to see land under private management, which they pay a fee in addition to any kind of council tax that they have. Would you have any comment on that?
Yeah, so generally we're not supportive of the kind of leasehold situation. There will always be in kind of flatted seams a very small area of defensible space that needs to relate to that building, and that will be picked up in the service charge. But generally what I would call sort of public space and common areas, we would rest with either the council, or we've done a scheme in Newport Pagnell where that went to the town council there. It's another developer trick of we won't pay the endowment, give the land over and we'll save some money, but then we'll pick it up from the residents later. So we know they do it and we won't be able to do it here. We haven't done it on schemes across Milton today.
So did you have a question? Do you want to come into Axel?
Yes, on the back of the green question. Hi, sorry, I didn't catch your name in the beginning.
Adam Scaberis.
Adam, fantastic. Adam, thank you for this. I'm just wondering, how are the Milton Keynes City Council's net zero commitments reflected in this brief?
Okay, I don't think it's explicitly mentioned in this brief yet, other than we have aspirations to be more sustainable. There's changes to building regs to consider, there's carbon zero homes to consider, and then there is affordability, parking and all the other constraints that will be on this project. So there will be some trade-offs to discuss later on.
You said yet. So is there an assumption that will be added to the brief later?
I don't see a problem with it being added to the brief in terms of an aspiration to be sustainable.
There, so comments we get in, we can.
Shouldn't it be perhaps more front and centre, considering that Milton Keynes City Council has this great net zero commitment that they made to all of the residents across Milton Keynes, in which we're very keen to address the climate emergency, yet it is not even mentioned. And you said aspirations. I think surviving a rapidly changing and deteriorating climate should be front and centre, hence why our council declared the climate emergency, and we're working out a plan to complement Milton Keynes City Council, and it would be, from my perspective, and some of the residents are represented in Fenny, absolutely pertinent to include this in the brief, please.
It would. The reason I say aspiration is because we know now there will be a conversation around the trade-offs and the cost of doing that. So we want to deliver affordable homes, we want to deliver sustainable homes. The reality is we can't have it all right now. And so there will be a decision point. So I don't want in the brief an absolute commitment to do carbon zero homes.
I'm not particularly about any, specifics of the plan. I just like it represented in the brief to say to the designers, look, this is a top priority for us. We declared an emergency and would like you to take that on board. So there's loads of ways to tackle that. And like you said, this is the very beginning. I think as a key kind of objective to meet for design partner to come on board, I think this would be critical, certainly from my point of view.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank you. Okay, next question. Reasonable rents. Many shops in Queensway are closing due to extortionate rent increases by mainly private landlords. How will Milton Keynes City Council or the Development Partnership ensure that rents of the new units will be kept to a minimum rate to avoid this outcome for the new development and to attract and maintain shops and leisure facilities in our high street for now and for generations to come?
Yeah, I guess the short answer to that is, in our experience so far, I'd refute that. I don't think businesses are leaving those shops because rents are high. For 18 months or so, we've had units available in the Brunel at next to no rent, and there is a real low demand and lack of demand for them. We've had community initiatives take them on to kind of cover the rates and service charge costs. The reality is there hasn't been high demand for those units. So we're not looking at providing even more retail because we think the demand that's there can fill Queensway as is today, and we're looking at other uses on the ground floor. I know at previous meetings we've had people ask if they're aware of community initiatives, could they take free space in the Brunel, and I've said yes, and feel free to contact me. So if people have got specific examples, happy to sort of discuss them.
So Ed, then Aisha.
Yeah, just on that point about the Brunel Centre, I realise actually there are still significant costs going there, even though the rent might be virtually nothing. For example, from the business rate side, some of those premises are quite large, but also the condition of some of those units, actually to bring them into a usable standard that a retailer or a commercial outlet would want to use for 2-3 years.
Yeah. But we've had a retail agent acting for us, and we've offered to put the units into a lettable condition to make them smaller, to divide them. I can honestly say, in trying to mitigate the costs and manage it responsibly on behalf of the council, we have tried to lease that space, and demand is very low.
So,
I disagree with that, because there have been a lot of residents. We have a business in the high street. The rent is high, and there is a lot of other businesses that are saying the same thing because it's private landlords. But the units that you're talking about inside the Brunel Centre, majority of the shops that have closed was Poundland and the Wilkinsons has gone, Poundland's gone. There's not much there for people to rent a unit because there isn't a footfall. That's probably why you're not getting the demand, because there's nothing for people to come into. There used to be a cafe there, there used to be Boots there, there used to be Poundland there, that used to bring people in. The bank was there, Sainsbury's was there. It's completely dead. Why would anybody want to rent a unit there where there's no footfall and there's no people? Yeah,
it definitely is quiet. So we've had tenants leave, but given the use of the car park behind it, footfall hasn't changed very much through the centre. People might be passing through it rather than stopping in there. But again, if you are aware of businesses that are looking to sort of stay in Bletchley even in the short term, we're happy to have a discussion around that. And I don't necessarily think providing more retail at the Brunel sort of helps that problem in the future.
Thank you. So whilst we're talking about the Brunel Centre, I have a question myself with regards to the Town Council, and it's actually about the toilets in Albert Street.
Yeah.
And obviously we manage those toilets and have done so for a very long time. We as a council, they're at the end of their working life, and we do not have security of tenure over that building and have not been able to negotiate security on that building for Milton Keynes Council. I think that we've been offered at least for a number of years, but we also are very mindful of their location and also that it could be that there is a long-term aspiration to develop around that site. And I think that we have looked at closing those toilets before, and that the community really want them to remain. They provide a lot of independence to a lot of people in Bletchley, but they're really expensive to use. And I wonder, as part of this new development, how, you know, we are absolutely happy to invest in those toilets and keep them operating for the long term, but actually, how do we either move to a new site or actually get the security that we need to make a long-term investment in those toilets being brought up to acceptable standards? And should they be part of the brief?
Yeah, so that message has made its way to me, thanks, Ophelia. We don't want you to spend or make any decisions on the Albert Street car park without knowing what the long-term plan is either. And we are supportive of them generally. Given what's going on in Bletchley, they probably are in the wrong place. You know, they're a good, it sounds like an odd thing to say, but they're a good sort of footfall driver. They help people dwell. You know, David and the team are looking at public realm out in Stanier Square. People don't dwell in public spaces if there aren't public toilets generally. They shouldn't have to go into a cafe or restaurant and spend money to use the toilet. We've been to see some great refurbishments of places like Bletchley Park, who've got changing places, facilities, and that's kind of a real need in Bletchley, and they find visitors stop off just to use them. So it's on our radar. It's not the most glamorous part of our job, but yeah, we're certainly looking at them and relocating them. Just let us get this brief underway and then we'll come back. Delia will not let me forget.
That's good. And just to come back on one of the things that you said, I actually hear from many residents, which came as a shock to me, that lots of the businesses that have operated in Bletchley don't let their customers use the toilets. And so actually they direct them to the public toilets, which actually means that businesses are being subsidised because it's actually council taxpayers that are paying for those toilets to be open, and it's not cost to the business themselves. So we're kind of very keen to reduce the cost to the council, and we can only do that by having a new build. So thank you very much for those points. I'm sure Julia will keep on it. Did you have a question?
Yeah. You were saying earlier that in your Brunel Centre, you're struggling at the moment to get people to take it. I've had a couple of people ask me about it, and I put them on to your guys, and no one's ever got back to them, and they only want a short-term lease.
Okay, I'm happy to give you my details directly. Yeah. And when you say my guys, I'm not sure who they've contacted or who they've got to. I know, to be honest with you, I know of a couple of inquiries that have been made, and one of them was martial arts as an example. That's not complementary to Total Dojo, who are already there in trading, so it wouldn't be right of us to give some cheap space to a competitor. Other than that, I'm not really aware of any that have got. I'll give you my details. I'll take that way.
That was looking into it.
It was what, sorry?
Food place.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you give me your details, I can pass them on.
Excellent, Terry.
Thank you, Chair. One more. How are we advertising these opportunities for people?
For the short term, so there's a retail agent working on it. They're advertised on property websites. It's letting boards up. We've got a centre manager that we've taken on recently, who's the historic centre manager, but now works for us, and sort of word of mouth with other tenants and members of the public that come through, and meetings like this, frankly, that say, you know, there's a shelf life on this. We're talking about knocking it down in 2026, so we need to be realistic. But hopefully, speaking to you guys who know the community better than we do, if you are aware of these kind of initiatives, we're happy to receive them.
Is there an opportunity for charities or charitable causes to take advantage of that?
Yeah, there are issues, you know, issues were mentioned with condition of the building. We've looked at rectifying those. There's a lot of asbestos in that building. We've looked at rectifying that. You know, we're happy to work with people and see what we can do to help it limp along to 2026.
Fantastic. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Jeff.
Sorry, numbers. Oh, sorry, Terry.
Yeah, just a couple of quick questions. In the vision statement, it says it will offer sustainable lifestyle options and choices fit for the 21st century. That is different from, but complementary to much of Milton Keynes offers. What is there different to what MK currently offers, do you think?
I think, you know, personally, I think there's a real opportunity to live at density around the train station and the opportunities there will be with East-West Rail and the north-south connections. That doesn't really exist anywhere other than Central Milton Keynes. I'd say the difference here is Central Milton Keynes can be a bit soulless, to be honest. So yes, you can go and live in an apartment block near a train station, it's convenient, but it hasn't got that kind of history and character here. So there's a real unique opportunity actually to make this a nice place to live.
And to get the footfall back down to Queensway from the IOT, from the train.
Yeah. So I had dinner in Panzini a couple of weeks ago, and we were sat there saying, actually, if some development here in footfall, that would be great. It's a really underused area down there.
Thank you. And the last one is really is explicitly joining up the Redway. It's got the new Redway that goes through Lees to the Blue Lagoon to the town centre and to the rest of Milton Keynes. Is that all really nice and joined up for sustainable sort of safe journeys?
It is, yeah. So the outline plan has it on two sides of the Brunel site, I think, at the minute in terms of the highways options. So yes.
Thank you.
Wonderful. So the final question from, oh no, actually there was two more. So the next one is around disruption. So some local businesses and residents have expressed concern regarding the disruption that will be caused by demolition and construction works for several years ahead. How will you ensure developers work to minimise any disruption to residents and businesses during this time?
Yes, so I suppose just to get out in front of this, how we will not be doing it, there won't be grants and sort of compensation available. I'd be open about that. There's a long process of engagement to go through and working with businesses and making sure they know when and what is happening. And to do that, the council will have a business liaison officer that sort of frequently contacts those businesses along the Queensway in particular. This is quite a large self-contained site that's pretty well accessed, Lock Road and sort of Bletchley Way, and I would hope that disruption to business on Queensway, for example, is pretty minimal due to how the site will be accessed. But I say it is a large site, it will be phased, and there's an ability to do quite a lot of the construction and the movements that are needed sort of within the hoarding within the site. It is, however, a large-scale regeneration project, and there will inevitably be disruption, but we will sort of seek to minimise that.
This disruption, you said earlier, you're going to start around about 2026. The shops that are already in there, you can't sort of very well say, well, you've got to go now, see you in 5 years' time. Just haven't come back. So what are you going to do with the shops that are already in there? Are you going to help them find other places in Bletchley?
Yeah, so we personally are having conversations with some of them about coming into the future scheme. Ones that are there, we'll be talking to our liaison officer at the council about vacant sites and seeing what else is available on Queensway and working through that. But the reality is there will be a gap. We won't be able to do a seamless transition and decant them away.
Okay, thank you. So the final question from the members of the public was the Bletchley and Fenny Stratford neighbourhood plan is in the final stages of delivery with policies concerning heritage, green and blue infrastructure forthcoming. Please can you give your public reassurances that you will work closely with the Town Council and local residents to ensure that this is mentioned in the design brief and proactively take into consideration throughout the development and delivery phases of this project?
Yes, David, are you able to answer that one?
Yeah, I mean, when we've got some details of what the neighbourhood plan is saying, then we'll put it in the brief. Obviously, the brief will be adopted early next year, so it won't be able to say, what the final content of the neighbourhood plan will be. That's, it won't be completed by then, the neighbourhood plan, but we can certainly maybe beef up the section that we've already got in there to make it clear that.
Yeah, I think if I can just speak, Chair, I think what's in the brief suggests that we're still at the collecting evidence stage. Well, we'll be collecting evidence all the way through the process, but we have got emerging policy ideas at this stage, and the intention is that there'll be a consultation in January on the emerging policy ideas, which I will liaise with you about.
Yeah,
of course.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, we can reflect what the most up-to-date stage of the neighbourhood plan is in the brief.
And I've got a question which I don't think, I'm surprised did not come up from local residents, because it's something that people talk to me about all the time when I'm walking down the high street, and that is car parking. And there's an issue with currently some of the parking behaviour in and around Queensway. I do think that I'm a regular or user myself of the sports centre car park, which actually a lot of people don't use, and we're looking at how we can redirect people to other parking. But I suppose just a general question, what capacity will there be for parking within the kind of development brief?
Yep, I'm surprised it hasn't come up to an hour. I thought I was going to get away with it. Yeah, so the brief mentions or refers to a parking study being commissioned. It has been commissioned. It's sort of underway at the moment. So it's a bit flaky on the amount of spaces we provide in the brief yet, because we don't know. What we don't want to do is provide a number of spaces within our red line just for our development, when actually at the moment the former Sainsbury's car park is functioning like a town centre car park. So it needs to be looked at in the round. In the round means the red line is sort of as wide as covering a lot of central Bletchley, the library, lots of other car parks that are de facto town centre car parks, the streets around. We're sort of cognizant of not doing something on our site that just displaces the problem out and around Bletchley. We're also aware that actually, you could provide 1,000 spaces on the Brunel site, it won't solve the problems elsewhere. So there's a number of spaces to determine, but there's also kind of behavioural and enforcement issues to talk through as well. So I think the results of that study will be available sort of end of this year, early next year. And then Daryl Dealer will be in contact to talk about the engagement of that and how we share the findings and what your views of that are before it ultimately ends up in a parking strategy. And then this development will respond to that strategy. And just one more thing I was going to come back on, just on retail really and shops. So our take on retail is, as I stated earlier, we are really keen though to talk to people that do have those links with business, whether it's that Queensway is not the right type of space, whether it is just purely the rent or not. We're happy to look at those kind of factors. Over the next couple of years, the opportunity to be having those discussions and work out what sort of space it is we need for the future. Is what we've got just not fit for purpose? Is it just too expensive? If it's too expensive, hopefully lots of footfall and extra residents helps drives their business and makes it all a bit more sustainable. But happy to have those conversations and to keep in touch over the next couple of years.
Thank you. Ed, did you have a question?
I do. So there's clearly lots of competing demands within this development, and to achieve quite a lot. We've talked about net zero here. That's one element, and it's really important that strand that goes through it all. But there's lots of other priorities here. So the shop frontages, the community facilities, the homes themselves, and the affordable element of those homes. I know that it doesn't. It's one point. It's about affordable homes in there. And clearly that is a big thing that we will want. Knowing the context of the affording homes in Bletchley, actually it's not easy. So affordable homes are going to be really vital. And we know we've got a huge list on the waiting list, and also privately to rent is hard, depending on what your income is. So you've got a series of different priorities, from parking to the affordable housing to the frontages. When it all comes forward and a development comes forward and they present some trade-offs, how will you balance that up against each other? And at the next stage of consultation, as you go through the seeking of development, how will further consultation happen around what some of those things will be? Will it be just something that has happened behind, I don't even say behind closed doors, but there's an element of competitiveness that you've got to take into consideration when finding development and weighing all of that up. What's that weighing up process in terms of seeking those developments?
Yeah, so we make a big deal out of property appraisals and the work we do, but they're really quite simple. There's value, less costs, and despite what people think about the rents and how much these properties are, there isn't much difference between them at the minute. So actually doing affordable, doing net zero, do all of these things just puts that cost up. A development won't come forward, frankly, without another partner with lots of funding. So the most obvious partner that does that is the government agency Homes England. They provide considerable grant funding for us to put more in that appraisal and be able to deliver affordable on some of those other competing ambitions. We're quite far out from this development, but they're very interested in Bletchley and they're very interested in sort of brownfield regeneration now rather than the kind of greenfield development like this one. We've had them here for 2 site tours already. We've been walking the site, specifically the Brunel, but Bletchley generally, and making sure they're sort of warmed up to the idea that they will need to partner with the council to deliver those ambitions. However, there is the central government situation and they're not able to commit to any funding that we would like in 2026 and 2023. So We have been successful on every scheme in Milton Keynes and always getting grant funding from Homes England, and we'll continue to be close to them, but we will need funding to make some of those things happen. Once we get to the decision around affordable housing and other, aspects like that, now is the time to be putting in reps on local planning policy and the development brief to talk about what the need is, because ultimately that comes from housing, and there's the kind of breadth and depth argument. Do you want a higher percentage or do you want less at a deeper level of affordability? Now's the time to be putting in those sorts of reps so that when we get to the decision point in 2026, we have a better sort of local view.
And actually, the point about the trade-offs for a lot of different things, so from parking to green homes to the shop frontages, community space, how will you trade some of those priorities off when they come through?
Consultation, a long process of consultation, not just with officers, not just with councillors, but most important people, the public really, and what they think, what they want to use on the ground floor, what their view of parking is. People on the ground that are using these places, we don't want to just sort of parachute a scheme in here and say we've worked it all out back at the office and here you go.
So before you choose a developer, will some of these things come forward for?
Not at that stage. I'd say once we've chosen the developers, so given the process we need to go on with design, we're likely it's to be team, not scheme. So we want to go and find a partner with a good track record of doing this and sort of ask what their approach for Bletchley might be, but it won't be that specific at that stage. Once they're here, they will then help us with the whole programme of engagement.
That's good. Thank you.
Aisha, did you have?
I was going to ask one of the questions that you had about the consultation runs out on the 23rd of November for anybody that has got any questions. The people that live there, you mentioned Dunk Street and Osborne Street, and I was at the Drisby meeting, and one of the recommendations I think Ed you made was about the language barriers, that some of these people don't speak the language and they need to be informed. Has that been done yet? Because in 2 days' time.
Yeah, so David, you don't know this and your presentation hasn't been updated, but we are extending the deadline. I have spoke to Councillor Mo Khan about using the community centre there, and we're looking at sort of language and translation for that. So there will be a slightly longer window. That's the sort of standard window that we started on this process with. But given some of the conversations we've had, we need to extend that slightly.
Can you make sure Aisha's involved in that as well?
Yep. So Daryl Canvin deals with the sort of engagement from the council's perspective, and he'll make sure, I'm sure, that that's out to all the right people. If we get it to you, Delia, hopefully you can help us get it out to the group here.
Do we know the likely date for the exhibition?
Daryl's looking at booking that community centre and when it is, but we're looking at another evening or weekend or something when people are around and have opportunity to pop in.
So that's all the questions. Roger, I saw you had your hand up. I can take one or two questions from the floor. Did you want to say something?
Thanks for being talking about. Thank you.
Okay. Any other residents want to ask a question? I can take one or two questions.
On that map, it showed you that you were going to extend from Buchan Road through into Queensway. I mean, is that going to be for traffic, or will Queensway be pedestrian only?
Yeah, it's just pedestrian or cycling access through there, not for vehicular traffic.
So where does the traffic go then?
It'll continue on the route that it has now, but it's more of a visual connection. So bringing back the shopping centre to the kind of historic building line and being able to see down Queensway from there.
You'd have to turn left, surely, to avoid Bletchley.
So it would follow the existing route.
Yeah. So I think what's being said is if the buildings are removed, you would have a sight line, so you could stand in Queensway and look towards the train station area and the cricket pavilion area, but actually traffic wouldn't use that route. It would stay as it currently does and goes on to Saxon Street, and traffic would have to enter via the other routes. So it's actually about creating a desire line so that people can see, but not having the traffic. So it's keeping the pedestrian aspect. Was there somebody else with their hand up?
Yeah, I'm a bit disappointed to hear that Sainsbury's will be taken down because there's been vandalism and all of that side of things, because the old job centre has been sitting there for 6 years empty and nothing has been done. And if that's an example of how the council, is looking after Bletchley, parts of Bletchley, then it's not a very good example. That's just a comment really, and I would like an answer to, why that places like that are being allowed to, get in the state they are, when we're looking at other things, and it's not a very good example.
I can answer that, Ethan.
Did you want to have a comment on that?
I'm not able to answer that, other than Sainsbury's is in our control.
Yeah.
I think it's the right thing to do to bring it down.
The point that I was going to say is that obviously a lot of Bletchley is owned by private developers. I believe the site, the old job centre, is actually either been consulted or there is planning in about changing that development into residences. And we can't, unfortunately, it's very difficult for either this council or Milton Keynes Council to force developers to develop properties that they own. It's private. But what we've got here is the development partnership have bought the building, and actually it is in their gift to kind of do something about the Sainsbury's site. I would probably say, looking at the size of the new site, it would be really difficult for the development partnership to buy up all these very small buildings and try and do what they're doing with Sainsbury's. So I think we kind of hear your point, but there's probably not a lot we can do about it.
I think just to come on to that, part of the town deal is about having this revolving fund. And so the revolving fund, I can't remember exactly what the number is, and someone will remind me in a moment, but it's being used to, for example, with Milton Keynes City Council and Development Partnership to buy the canal centre.
Yep.
And then this development will happen. And with that development partner, and Milton Keynes City Council, the development partnership will receive that money back in some form, and that will then go into other sites to be able to reinvest. So that's why they call it the revolving fund. So the longer term idea is that through the town deal funding that we've got, that revolving fund can be used again and again and again to develop other sites as and when appropriate. So the big one at the moment is the Brunel Centre, but there might be other things in the future that might well need to be, I mean, it's a bit of a open book and there's no specific sites or anything being thought of, but it's that principle, there is the thing in the future that this money can be then be reinvested somewhere else into the town.
Thank you. So is that some kind of answer to your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I think that we'd like to thank you very much for coming to meet with us tonight and talking to us, and we are really happy to kind of work with you all to kind of keep this dialogue going. Thank you very much and for answering all of the questions, and anything that the council can do to assist you with any kind of consultation or reaching residents, we're happy to do that. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Cheers.
You are completely welcome to stay for the other business that we have, but also if you do not want to stay to hear us talk about minutes of various meetings, you are also very welcome to leave. Thank you very much. All right. We will. I think we'll take a recess for a couple of minutes just to allow people to leave if they want to.
Yeah, I don't know when we'll be there.
Yeah. She's doing well. Catch her at the top of there.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Feels like really
Brilliant. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So we need to clear the path. Yeah, that's something about our message.
My meeting was very lovely. It's
screen stuff. So, thank you. I am mindful that we all don't want to be here very late. So, do we have any comments from councillors? Anybody want to give any comment on anything they've heard tonight before we move on?
I think we need to approve our response, and I have made a few notes of things that came up that you might want to include in the response, which was the issue about nightclub and casino, which obviously that wording was lifted from the National Planning Policy Framework, so that could perhaps be amended. There was also the issue of green space and the service charge issue, net zero. Talked about the toilets, we probably want to include that in our representation, and the affordable housing representations, and parking.
Yeah.
The main notes I
One of the questions was that mentioned that somebody approached, it was a martial arts safety conflict of interest because it's competitive. We've got so many places, so many charity shops, so many cafes, they're all competitors. So why is it one rule, one thing? And
sorry, I think the point there was it was about low cost use of the existing facilities. What he's saying is you've got a lease with somebody who's paying a commercial rent, and you can't have somebody having a site for free to do something which would compete again, because that wouldn't be fair.
Right, okay.
I don't think he was talking about, I don't think that the gentleman was talking about not having any competition. It's actually about it being fair competition.
right, okay, I probably didn't.
I just wanted to add about the neighbourhood plan. I mean, obviously they did give their commitment to sort of working with us on the emerging policy ideas in that sense, but we could be good to get that in writing.
Regarding nightclubs and casinos, and bars and restaurants in our town centre, we have what I call quite a, I think, poor nighttime economy, as in if you look at different towns, even Wolverton's got a little bit of a flow of people coming up and down the town centre. There's pubs, bars, and we haven't really got anything down our town centre apart from Captain Wrigley's and a few takeaway shops and a couple of restaurants off the side street, but nothing really traditional down our town centre, which won't bring anybody into our town centre. If they was to put a hub there and it was mixed use or multi-use site, the one thing I'm concerned about is if there is a late night bar or restaurant or something like that, where they do obtain that licence till 1 o'clock in the morning, till 2 o'clock in the morning, and you don't need to be a nightclub to have these type of licences. What you do have is bars that stay open later. And part of the actual build, say for instance, if there was a restaurant or a bar that stayed open until 2 o'clock, and residential is then going to start getting noise complaints from the bars and the restaurants or whatever that's staying open. And that's all I'm concerned about, is how are they going to address that, whether the build and they're going to soundproof it, if there's going to be resi on top, if you know what I mean. So that's the only thing that I'm a little bit concerned about, but that's in the detail, isn't it, I would have said. But I would like to see more nighttime economy or daytime economy, as in a few more bars open up and down High Street, or wherever it may be, to attract people to sit down, have a couple of drinks, this, that, the other. I mean, you know, I'm just thinking how we can revitalise our town centre without having more charity shops and more nail bars and more, say, for instance, betting and bookies. Because that's what we're going to end up with if we don't have the right type of people coming with the right type of money that want to invest into our town centre. That's the only thing I've got to say there. Private money will bring, got to have a balance somewhere along the line.
Any other comments?
We need everything that was taken away from Bletchley back in again to make it Bletchley.
What specific?
So, like shops, retail shops that are closed down. We need retail shops. That's what we need the banks back.
So for me, I think that we really need to be honest and we aspirational about what we want. But I think that we have to accept that for supermarkets, they are not interested in being in Bletchley Town Centre, and actually for supermarkets, the town centre has actually moved, and now we've got massive supermarkets, you know, towards Denby and also by the Saxon Street roundabout, and I don't see any supermarkets coming back into the Queensway.
So I think you're right in terms of the big supermarkets. I think Sainsbury's will, in comparison to some of their other sites, which are probably small Sainsbury's in comparison to some of their things, it was actually quite a small supermarket, but quite important in its day and for many in that part of Bletchley in terms of access. Whether there's anything that we should be saying in terms of giving some sort of thing to development brief that a retail unit should be the size suitable for the size of a large Tesco Express or a large or medium sized.
Like Heron's Food, you know, like the cheap food places.
Yeah, something like that. Whether there is anything that, I mean, because we know that people want something in that part of Bletchley to serve some of their basic needs in terms of food and access to I'm just thinking of you can see across Milton Keynes some large, small format grocery stores that might well be desirable in the development.
As you still got Lidl's, Aldi's and Iceland's just there, right on the edge of the town centre. When you're talking about serving, say for instance, what I call the Burger King site, which is all them busies going up there, and what they were proposing in Sainsbury's site and Brunel Centre, I think there could be something there, but on a small scale, but you're definitely not going to get a large chain there.
No. Convenience food, convenience store would be probably the option.
Yeah.
Which is where I'm talking about, like, I don't necessarily want to use the word competitor, but you've got like Tesco's, Sainsbury's local, Co-op, that sort of type of retail.
There's clothes shop, shoe shop, things like that. We don't have.
We can't get into this, like, because this is not for, you know, essentially what will end up there is who ends up kind of, you know, and we can't say it has to be this. We can be aspirational and say this is what we would like to attract back to the town centre. But some of these things have left the town centre because actually, you know, shoe shops, people don't buy shoes in shoe shops anymore. They buy them from supermarkets or they buy them from clothing stores. And I think that the council has to be really careful about saying it wants certain things when actually nationally this really doesn't happen anymore. I think that I know that people, you know, in our football team, people buy their football boots on Amazon. You know, so this is one of the reasons that I think if we're going to give any view from the council, I think we've got to be really realistic because we're not going to be listened to if we're not. I think there was some points about the nighttime economy. What kind of things do councillors feel they would like to see and would be acceptable in terms of the nighttime economy? Because I've heard from some residents that they feel frightened to go into Queensway late at night. Now, I've been there quite a few times. I'm not, but actually a real empty street can actually, you know, and there being nobody there can actually be quite intimidating. So having some usage of Queensway late at night might help people to feel safer. So are there any points about the nighttime economy that people would want to make?
Lighting, maybe? Lighting.
Well,
Yeah, sorry, I was just picking up on the point. I was going to make the same thing, lighting and just making it safe for residents.
I think that I was about target uses. So restaurants, bars, what would you feel that you would be happy to consider?
Anything that doesn't attract a culture that will trash the place.
If I could just remind everyone, what we're being asked to do is comment on a specific document, on a specific development. And I think we've got to tie our comments to the development brief itself. And there is a section in the development brief which was alluded to in the presentation, which makes reference to the National Planning Policy Framework definition of town centre use, which includes all the stuff like casinos and nightclubs and so on. And I heard Adam say that he had to receive a representation that said no nightclub or casino. So are we suggesting that the wording of that section of the brief should be amended to say that we would like to see nighttime use, but not necessarily nightclubs or casino?
I think that would be really good. Because one of the things that I am worried about is limiting, because if we limit, or you know, it will either not be taken up or will not be attractive to a developer.
What about time limit though?
Like,
can we say like only up to midnight or?
No.
That we dealt with through the planning process. I mean, this is an invitation to developers to put in the planning.
Do you want a proposal for comments or?
I think if we could
What are we doing?
collect something.
Yeah.
And then perhaps I could read it back.
Yeah.
And I mean, we're not going to get every detail of the word, if we get the principle.
We've got what you said about the nighttime economy.
Yeah.
I think that the stuff around service charges and green space maintenance, I think that's really, you've got that already. Any comments that you wanted to, we aspire to have, to make a difference on sustainability. And is there anything you would want to say about that, Axel?
I think it's also important to say some of the elements that we support in terms of some of our previous decisions as a council.
Yeah.
So, for example, the support in terms of the connections with the rail, the train station, the rail station, and mentioning that all in, I think it's really important we re-emphasise some of our comments before, because we did say we welcome this development, we welcome the town deal and MKDP, MKCC getting hold of those sites, and we put some wishes in that very early motion that we had.
We have, and that is, just to remind everyone, that that motion said that, you know, we felt the combined ownership of the site would unlock opportunities for the development of Bletchley, including the opening of research through the SPC, new retailers, new businesses, community facilities and a health hub. We also supported the development of the transport hub, and we've recently passed a separate resolution, again supporting that. So that's there as well. So there's already that resource position, and then there's the points that have come out of tonight. Now,
I think it's just important to have those combat support in our
the responses
in our response to it, because
it can be reiterated.
Yeah, if you're pushing out a development brief and you're consulting with that, someone says, "Oh, I don't like that. I don't want Queensway opened," for example. Someone might say that comment. They might well then listen to that comment and then not listen to the wider bit. I don't think they will on that one, but it's that thing, making sure that those areas that we're very supportive of are also we just say agree with.
Start the representation by reiterating the key things that we have already supported in the brief through the SPD, because really the brief is predominantly based on the SPD. And then go on to the specific issues. So the nighttime economy, so we've agreed on that. Service charges and green space maintenance, we just want to emphasise that we don't want the cost to be passed on to the resident. Is that the point?
Particularly, I mean, it hasn't called it out for what it was, leasehold. We don't want leasehold development.
Then we've got the issue of net zero, and that's not being sufficiently prominent in the brief.
Sorry, Gavin and Ron had a question as well. But if you guys don't mind.
Sorry, question. I was going to put a proposal, but you'll go through it and you know what I was going to say. So.
I'll just answer Ethan's question and Delia's question. I think the main comment I would like us to make is around our commitment to net zero and the declaration we made as a council a few years back about the climate emergency. So for me, it needs to be front and centre, obviously, I would say that, you know me. But as a council, going back to something that we made a declaration on, and we have the start of a policy document, it needs to be in there.
When you was on about the nighttime economy, you got to realise you want to try and have it family orientated as well. You know, when mum and dads and the kids can come out till 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night. You know, something like a bowling alley or something. You know, something in.
That's why we don't limit. That's why we don't limit it.
Yeah. I mean, you got to sort of think of everybody, not just people like having a late night out, but you've got to be family orientated as well, because that's what you're missing in Queensway.
I think I'd have a comment on that.
So just on the next other thing, completely agree. It's important that we weave it in. I'm just concerned about some of the language that we use and when we were saying top priority earlier. Actually, there's a mix of priorities here. And we know from past experience that actually people have been calling for Queensway in this area of the town to see regeneration. And so actually there's a number of priorities that are important. So from the retail, from the nighttime economy, the affordable homes element, all of these are actually really big priorities. And I think instead of net zero is important. Is really, really important. But it should be woven through. But I don't think we should be necessarily saying this is top priority, but saying that it should be woven through and the climate considerations be considered throughout. Yes.
They're going to extend the consultation, and we've got a full council next week on the 28th. Would it be helpful if I drafted something up?
I think that would be great.
And then you can all discuss it and decide on it next week on the 28th.
So could we? So I make a proposal that we do that, and that you go back to them before the 23rd and tell them, as they've told us they're going to extend.
Can we?
We would like a few more days to do so. Yes. If people are in agreement with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Carl, can I just make a comment quickly? Not about that, because that's fine. Public realm, no, not public realm. The town deal board.
Yes.
And the public realm is looking at Queensway, isn't it? About the lighting, the safety aspect, and all these other things that we put forward to the town deal board before.
Yes.
So it's about making Queensway a lot more safe place, a lot more user friendly and stuff like that, isn't it?
Yes. The town deal board has a public realm improvement project, which is specifically looking at Queensway and also Aylesbury Street. This development brief is specifically about the Brunel site.
There's two things.
I mean, obviously the things are connected, and I wouldn't be surprised if there wasn't another development brief about Albert Street at some stage. Who knows?
All right.
Who knows? So
if people are happy with that proposal, is there a second down? Yeah. Thank you. All those in favour? I think that is unanimous.
So can I just check that I've got the key points that I need to work up? So we talked about the nighttime economy, the service charges, the net zero. We have to mention the toilet. The representation on affordable housing, I think, is really important, and that's where I think I need some guidance from you about what you would want to say about that.
So I think on that, there is a whole load of stuff within the planning department, housing department, MKCC around what the needs are. And so I think, I don't think we're necessarily always in the position to, because we don't have that data in front of us, to be able to come up with a full comment, but it's how do we make sure that we're saying to them, I'm sure there will be conversations happening, but it's just reiterating that point that affordable, and that it needs to be truly affordable, not just this weird definition of affordable, which is 2/3 of a lot is still a lot. Or sorry, 80% of a lot is still 80% of a lot.
There was points about the neighbourhood plan and them asking them to take consideration of our emerging policies, and parking. We welcome the parking strategy and ask them to take that findings of that on board. Is there anything else that needs? Oh, the eastern entrance of the station and all the stuff that we.
I really want to reinforce the section 106. It's so important that the section 106 is invested into Bletchley and not is going. You know, I would love a university to be in central Milton Keynes and for us to become a university city, but actually, I think that. You know, we have limited development areas in our community, and actually, if we're going to take development, we need to ensure that money gets reinvested back in Bletchley, because the only way that we're going to get funding for anything is going to be from development. Aisha.
One question is regarding the parking, and this is not just my question; it's the question from the residents that live there. Because there's a parking issue down Duncan Street and Osborne Street, and it's been an ongoing issue forever. The residents have asked, they said, when they're knocking down the Brunel Centre, some of the residents used to park there. Will the council allow them to have some parking there for some of the residents that live there, allocated them on like a permit? Because obviously there's not enough parking down the street. Lorries are going down there, buses are going down there, cars are getting damaged. The residents want to be asked to see if they will be allowed to have some parking, like some slots. They're willing to pay. They said we don't mind paying like a fee that we pay every year for the residents permit. We just want it allocated to the people that live there. So when they're building around that, would they consider that? Because that's going to be an eyesore for Duncan Street when they.
The only thing with Duncan Street over the years is that you've got now traditionally multi-generational living, and people are living more with their parents now more than ever. So when I say multi-generational living, you've got grandparents, parents and children now that are now coming of age, getting a car. There is 2 or 3 sets of cars, you've only got a sliver of the road. So ultimately, over 10 years, 20 years, Duncan Street's going to get hugely busy. With they're having a mosque there as well, the Friday night prayers and stuff like that. You're going to get that, possibly more foot traffic than cars, but multi-generational living is something that happens in some communities, no matter what. And obviously the cars that are usually, you have more cars type situation. So we just got to watch that again. And I think that with the fact that you've got that big Sainsbury's car park there, people can park really quite easily. It's only 30p a day, 30p an hour.
Yeah, but when you say there's a multi-generation of people living,
talking about the future, yes, but yes.
There is a lot of community. I live on that street, so I know about that street. I was born there, I was raised there, I had my children there, and the people that live there, they don't live in one house. They probably own the whole street. Like 3 families probably have 3 houses down there. So there is a need for parking, and parking in Sainsbury's, if parking for the day is 30p. They don't have enough parking space, even with one family having 1 car on that road. There isn't enough parking because there's other people that just park on the double yellow lines.
Of course, yeah.
During the times of, and I've raised this about the mosque issue where people come to pray, and I've said, listen, I'm willing to give you 30p for that hour, but you're blocking the access for a disabled person. Take that.
Well, that's a parking enforcement thing, isn't it?
Yeah, but
that's a parking
the question is what they're asking is they're saying, can they have some spaces in that area for parking? They're willing to pay. They don't want it for free for the year, how they're parking, so that at least when they come from work, they can park the car there and not worry that they have to move it after.
I think that we've noted that and don't want this to get into a conversation. So we will, I think we'll make the point, but I think also, I think going back to the local residents there, it's really important that they hear residents' voices as well. So we need to encourage them to also contact or to respond to the consultation.
I will address that with people.
And I think there was a clear point there about that consultation, particularly with I think that used to the Duncan Street Community House with Mo and you and KDP to talk through and see how they can get across some of the barriers there are in terms of communication, language barriers, etc., to make sure that that community is particularly represented.
So if
So if I work something up and circulate it well in advance of next week's meeting, to be a late item, I'll add a late item to the agenda.
Can I just add one thing to the list about the question about the heritage, because I think that's quite important as well in terms of any new development or change in that area should sort of have some sort of a theme or just sort of bearing that sort of that heritage in mind whilst it's being built, because obviously Bletchley is associated to Bletchley Park, and just having that sort of link, whether it is by named buildings or whatever in that sense, and I think it's a really sort of good idea in that sense.
Everyone agree?
Sorry, did you have a
No, sorry, I've just already assumed that there's going to be the Bletchley Park Hotel, so I think you're going to get that anyway. I see visions ahead.
Right. So that's the kind of response. We'll.
I'll get it out as soon as possible so people can play with it and you'll be ready to argue about it next week.
Wonderful. Okay, so now on to item 7. To note the draft minutes of committee meetings held since the last meeting of council and to consider any recommendations therein. And hopefully, councillors, you will have read the minutes already as part of the agenda. So I will go to 7.1, minutes of the meeting Tuesday the 10th of October of the Community Committee, pages 49 and 50 of your pack. Any comments on those minutes? No, I will take those minutes as being approved.
There's a recommendation on that one.
So is the recommendation?
And I wanted to ask a question on that because I think there's a recommendation also on the Employment Policy Committee one, and it relates to budgeting of staff for events and how the two things relate to each other. I don't know, Clark, if you want to just...
Yes, the recommendation from the Community Committee was to put forward a budget of £55,000 for events next year. And in the Employment Policy Committee, we had quite a lot of discussion about the staff resource that would be needed if that number of events that were listed were to take place. We wouldn't be able to support that from the existing staff budget. There would need to be an additional contribution to cover staff costs. So I think that figure may need to be reconsidered going forward. But there are a lot of items that committees have recommended for the budget, which can go in, they're in the budget, I've put it in the budget, but I think there's going to have to be more debate about it. So, I mean, it was next week. So it was resolved to support that and to recommend that the budget goes into that amount goes into the budget, and we've put it in the draft budget that's going forward next week. Okay. But there is more to the discussion than is reflected just there.
Have you got a question on that?
No, I just wanted to make sure that this was brought through because there's clearly one recommendation and there's another recommendation coming through, and there is a slight disjointing of them. So to say that they're both bad or they're both good. It's just that the 2 meanings of them could change it.
I'm going to propose that we accept the minutes and defer the conversation about the budget to next week. So second that. All those in favour? Thank you. Okay. Next minutes of meeting Tuesday the 7th of November, Employment Policy Committee, pages 51 to 54. Is that the same point, Ed?
There was resolved to recommend that Town Council should allocate a staff and budget for each community event to accommodate these needs.
Okay.
So that item is on the agenda for next week. Those incorporates those two.
So we'll note, and the correct place for the budget discussion is the meeting next week. So everybody happy with that? All in favour? Thank you. Item 7.3, minutes of meeting Tuesday 14th of November, Environment and Planning Committee, pages 55 to 58 of your pack. Are there any recommendations on that?
I don't think there's any recommendations in there.
Okay, all councillors happy to note that. Thank you. Okay, we'll next move on to the next one. 7.4, minutes of meeting Tuesday 24th of October of the Finance and Governance Committee. Is there any recommendations on that?
Yes, there are. Yes, there are. So the first one is on page 61. The recommendation to full council that the internal audit report be formally approved. Now, I have got a few copies of the internal audit report with me, but I did not attach it to the agenda. The reason for that being that the report said there were no matters to be brought to the attention of the town council, and the Finance and Governance Committee reviewed it very thoroughly. So I have got copies here. Nobody's asked me for sight of a copy, so I'm assuming everyone will be happy to.
So I'm going to propose that we adopt the internal audit report for 2023 to 24 as recommended by the council, seconded by Richard. All those in favour? Anybody against? Any abstentions? That is unanimous.
And then after that, there were two policy documents that were reviewed by the Finance and Governance Committee. One was the investment policy and one was the procurement policy. They were circulated before the meeting. There were no changes to those policy documents. They were reviewed in detail. Again, I've got copies here, but nobody's asked me for sight of them. And I assume that you'll be happy to keep them as they are.
As they are, there are no changes to the document, and it was just a review with no change. I'm going to propose en bloc that the investment policy and procurement policy is adopted, seconded by Richard. All those in favour? Anybody against? Any abstentions? That is unanimous. Everybody happy then with the minutes of the 24th of October? And they are, sorry, question?
I assume the recommendations around the charges and the increase in cost for emptying dog bins and utilities for.
Separately on the agenda.
Is it on this agenda?
Separately on this agenda. So next item. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the
dog bins as well.
The dog bins, no, the dog bins can be.
But that will be budget item
That's in
next
the
week.
budget. That's a recommendation to include the cost in the budget. But there was a recommendation from the committee on proposed changes to the hire charges at Newton Leeds, in line with the council's adopted policy on changing charges. And it was really the hiring charges at Newton Leeds and Fenny Stratford Community Centre that after the committee had made its recommendation, officers have been doing some research and visited some other councils and looked at what's been going on. And we have, there were some concerns that these increases were too high if we were to sustain the level of bookings that we want to sustain at Newton Leeds and at Fenny Stratford. So it was suggested that that should be amended. It doesn't say what it should be amended to in my notes. So I suppose what I'm going to ask you to do is say that you not adopt that recommendation, and can it be looked at next week on the 28th?
So with further discussion, to consider a proposal to amend the Finance and Governance Committee's recommendations on proposed changes to hire charges at Newton Leeds Pavilion.
Ed might have the note.
Okay.
No, I don't have the note, but what I wanted to just say is that on the finance minutes, there are, under that recommendation, there are two other bits which aren't related to Newton Leeds Pavilion.
Yes.
Is that going to be deferred till next week?
No, it's just the Newton Leeds and Fenny Stratford.
Okay, so there's another two parts to that recommendation around photocopying charges and all other charges.
Charges.
Okay. So,
sorry.
We'll do the last bit first. So,
increase the charges for photocopying by 5p with effect from the 1st of April.
Okay. And so I will propose that. Richard, will you second? All those in favour? Thank you. And the next item?
All other charges to be increased by CPI at a rate of 6.8% with effect from the 1st of April. So that recommendation still is there, but it's the scale of charges for Newton Leys Pavilion and Fenny Stratford Community Centre that we'd ask you to defer.
So if I was to say all charges except for charges at Newton Leys Pavilion and Fenny Stratford Community Centre are to be increased by the July rate of CPI 6.8%, with effect from the 1st of April 2024. Richard will second. All those in favour? Anybody against? Any abstentions? Okay, so that is carried by majority.
And those charges will be deferred for consideration.
Yeah, and then for coming back to that point about Newton Leys Pavilion and Fenny Stratford Community Centre, if you are happy with that proposal, we will defer until we have conversation next week, so the new charges can be put before you. Will you second that? All those in favour of that? Thank you very much. I now declare the meeting closed at 21:08. Thank you very much.